going through unpublished reports that were in the deep dark archives of the Knowledge Resource Centre at DSC and other libraries to build a bit of a data bank to get an idea of where these valuable areas are. So, take a case point, the Bawball Plateau area. We mapped on an area that was designated a site of national geological and geomorphological significance. This area, this kind of geology on the Bawball Plateau only occurs on the Mount Buffalo Plateau and nowhere else. It's also a site of national botanical significance, so we got an idea of where those values occur. It's also a site of global zoological significance, so it has leadbeater's possum, and in the same area you have bauble frog, smoky mouse and broad-toothed rat, and each of those species has a very unique habitat requirement, and it's quite unique to find them all in the one spot. However, current forest management practices have not recognised those values, and so what you see here is the logging that's occurred on these sites. So we see that current forest management practices and forest management plans are not adequately protecting, so it draws the need for adequate reserve design. We also got into scientific reports, some of them published, some of them not published. In the case of this map, it was actually suppressed, so the public wouldn't see it, but we actually tracked it down and dug it back up, and it's informed our process. Again, mapping the logging history on top, you can see that these areas too have been compromised or have been undergoing a threatening process through inadequate management. We also looked at sub-catchments. We broke up the Central Highlands into sub-catchments to get a bit of an idea of where species were distributed. So this is based on the Biodiversity Atlas, the concentration of leadbeater's possums in those sub-catchments. So the blue areas indicate a higher proportion of the overall population in the Central Highlands being in those areas. When the fires hit, we see a number of those sub-catchments go off the map. Now that blue area that you see there, that's the Ada River catchment area. None of that's in any formal protection, and yet we've got about 20% of the entire known population of leadbeaters there. So this is what a potential map could look like. It's in development, it's in review. People are continually going through and adding to it. Again, tonight is an opportunity to invite feedback. But the areas that are light green are the existing reserve system. The areas that are dark green are the expanded reserve system, and the areas in red are potentially where some form of low impact forestry can occur. Now the reason why we're in need of a big, large reserve system is that we've had significant disturbance through fire and logging, and it's taken out, or it's disturbed a large percentage of the existing reserve system. Secondly, we can't rule out that future fires will occur. They will occur. And what we need is a reserve system, as David said, that exceeds the size of that disturbance event, so that we get refugias that remain unburnt, that are protected, that can carry species into the future and not end up with the habitat bottleneck that we're currently facing. And I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. So now we have an opportunity for some questions from the House. Diane, where's Diane? Is here with a roving mic. So if you have a question, can you please gravitate towards the end of the row so that Diane can bring the mic to you. So.
My name's Gabriel Lumpy. Where does wildfire control burns, which the DSC is now committed to doing at a much more rapid rate than it ever has done before, where do they fit into this picture?
Okay, my response to that is that these wet forests are not places that you would be doing hazard reduction burns. This system has already had a lot of fire, it doesn't need more fire. So that's the first part of the answer. So we shouldn't be burning mountain ash forest. That's not a hazard reduction, it's not an appropriate form of management in these kinds of systems. That's the first thing. The second thing is that we have looked very carefully at house loss after the 2009 fires. This was work that was led by one of my postdocs, a man called Philip Gibbons, and he looked at the relationship between the probability of house damage and a range of factors. Fire weather is obviously a very significant driver. Trees within 30 metres of a house is another significant driver. Hazard reduction burning does have an effect. It's fairly small, but it does have an effect. But it needs to be done within 3 years, and it needs to be done within 500 metres of a house. So what that means is that if we are going to use hazard reduction burning to protect people and property, we need to do it close to where people are, and we don't need to go way out the back of wherever to be doing that, because it has very little effect on protecting people and property. Now, I know what the Royal Commission said, but the Royal Commission is not right in terms of what the science shows relative to reducing risk, which needs to be close to where these things happen. So, that research is important because it means that we focus the protection work close to where it's going to matter, not very distant in places where it isn't going to matter relative to protecting people and other assets. And that's important because we don't always have access to a lot of money to do things, and if we don't have a lot, we're restricted with resources. We need to focus on where they're going to be effective. And hazard reduction burning in mountain ash forest is not appropriate for the system, and it's not appropriate for protecting people and assets there.
Buses, stags in low severity fire.
Yeah, and plus you lose, that's a very good point from David Blair there, is that you also lose the large old trees even with low severity fire, which is a significant problem that we don't want to exacerbate. Yeah.
Thank you, David. And thank you, Gabriel. That reminds me that when you ask a question, please introduce yourself so that we know who is asking the question. So,
hi, my name is Gail Cole, and I'm a former resident of Talangi. And having been recently up there, I was very distressed at the logging that's happening up there. And I was wondering, when you referred to building this structure for tourists, do you think that would indirectly have an effect on future logging in Talangi? Would it help stop what's going on there?
I haven't thought about it in that way. The ways that I've thought about this are that the present form of logging, clear felling, has highly significant negative effects on deep-bedded possum, on the structure of the forest, on the fire proneness of the forest, and the amount of green forest, which is very important for the animal as well. I've thought about it in terms of the rate of logging, because I'm very concerned about the rate of cutting in this system. When I worked, first of all, within the Forest Commission of Victoria, I was working for WWF on leadbeater's possum, but within the Forest Commission of Victoria, that was in 1983 and 84. And then within what was then called DCE, Department of Conservation and Environment, from 1990 to 1992, it was widely recognised at both points of time that there was a significant rate of over-harvesting, over-cutting in that system. And so my greater concern in this system is the rate of cutting, the rate of depletion of the present resource, the need for large areas of intact green forest, the need to reconstruct the forest along the lines of what I was saying. So, yes, it's a roundabout way of answering your question in the sense that it's clear to me that there needs to be a significant reduction in the amount of cutting that takes place in this system, and that significant reduction in cutting needs to take place for a whole range of reasons. But I also think it's now time to rethink where this industry is at, where the forest resource is at, and rethink the outcomes, the opportunities from an alternative way of looking at this system. And that alternative way is built around tourism and the development of tourism infrastructure and service industries associated with that.
Thank you, Gail. Next question, please. Gentleman coming across.
Hi, my name is Peter Wadham. Fantastic presentation, thank you. I just want to clarify, when you said the dry forest can actually become less fire prone if it's logged, is some forests in this area classified as dry?
So the dry forests to which I was referring to specifically there were the ponderosa pine forests of the southwest of the USA, where there's been significant changes in grazing regimes, significant changes in clearing, and major changes in the fire regimes over the last 100 years there that lead to increased fire proneness and the possibility of catastrophic fire that knocks out the system. So what's taken place there under work led by Wally Covington is there's been careful thinning and systematic thinning of that forest to reduce its fire proneness. And there are other systems worldwide which indicate that that's potentially a management approach for those dry forests. What we see though is that's not appropriate for use in wet forests because it makes those forests more fire prone, including thinning. And so that's not an appropriate option for that kind of system. And whether or not that relates specifically to changing the fire proneness of some of the drier forests, for example, stringy bark, ironbark kinds of forests, that's a matter of conjecture because the work hasn't been done.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Peter. This gentleman down in front row back here. Thanks, Diane. This is why we chose someone fit to run the mic.
Congratulations on the talk, David. My name is Pat O'Shaughnessy. I was a long-term researcher into water yield in Mountain Ash. I just make two comments. I think we should not ignore the risk to this whole forest area of fires starting in the west of the Hume Highway and roaring through. I think it's a bigger issue as population increases in that part of the world. I think this is a thing we need to bear in mind. And the other thing is I propose that even if there is logging to continue in some of the ash forests, the need for long rotations. Currently the rotation age is 80 years, which means the average age of the forest is 40, which means the forest is at almost its maximum water use point of view. I would hold at least over 150. There'd be a less timber in terms of royalties, but a much higher value timber. They're just two comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. That was wonderful to hear from you. I haven't seen Pat for many years, and he was the person that gave me permission to be able to work in the catchments. And still, the seminal paper is O'Shaughnessy and Joe Soria, 1991. Sorry? And yes, and Langford before that. But still, nevertheless, seminal work on forest hydrology and the relationships between forest age and water yield, which I think very important, which everybody should read.
Thank you, Pat.
Yeah, hi, my name's Mandy, and I'm just wanting to, find out how we can actually source information to share about, particularly about the fires, because I have been told and heard and read and saw footage of information about old growth forests and wet forests being less fire prone. And then when I went searching for it to share it, and particularly in a more everyday way with friends and family and that sort of thing, I couldn't really find it. I'm obviously not a scientist. Is there somewhere we can go to kind of get information like that that's scientifically got the tick of approval?
You can contact me if you want on this material, and I've got some cards with me. I will send you page proofs or reprints of those documents. There's also an ANU website that posts every single publication, but there's the review paper in 2009, the landscape trap paper in 2011, and the paper on house loss and property damage associated with the 2009 fires that was published by Phil Gibbons in 2012. That information is also available from David Blair and Lockie McBurney, who are ANU employees that live and work down here. I make a policy of sending material to anybody that requests it. And I can tell you on the subject of leadbeater's possum in these forests, my email traffic now is over 200 emails a day on this material. I've never seen anything like it, but I will send you material as quickly as I can as I'm sifting through those emails. So if you want to come get me at the end of the talk, I'll give you a card and I'll send you that material.
Thank you, Mandy. Lady in the back row of the front section. We haven't been down this way yet, so.
Hello, thank you, David. My name is Karina from Warburton Environment, and we do a lot of community outreach in Warby about these issues. And one of the things that gets put to us about the focus on the leadbeater's possum is, well, from the most compassionate part of the community is, so what, it's a possum, you know. So I'd really love to hear a little bit more about the possum as a keynote species and the other species that we're protecting when we protect the possum. Because otherwise, for some people in the population, it's overlooked.
Okay, that's a good point. Okay, so let's start with the structure of the forest. And one of the reasons why I laboured the point about large old trees is that the cavities that those trees provide are critical habitats for 40 other cavity-dependent species in that system. Now, many of those other species occur much more widely than just ash forest. So that's the first issue. But nevertheless, for this particular forest type, we've got 40 species of cavity-dependent animals. So that's absolutely critical. The other issue is that the conservation of leadbeater's possum, as I said before, and as we've written about, is truly a test case of ecologically sustainable forest management. And I would argue and contend that there is no way possible with a forest that is now only 1% old forest, that has a high risk of reburning, and has the state's faunal emblem on an extinction trajectory, there is no way known that that kind of forest management could even be remotely conceived of as being ecologically sustainable and being certified under Forest Stewardship Council or any other certification scheme as being sustainable. That has a significant impact because it means that the price of the paper that's produced is significantly depressed. Now, I think we need to recognise here that we're managing a public resource for maximum public benefit. That's a really critical thing. My parts of my family came from a public service background, and that was what we used to hear across the dinner table all the time about these kinds of things. The further issue here is we're not only talking about the sustainability of populations of animals, but also the sustainability of the fundamental processes that run that forest itself. And two of those key processes are the fire regimes and the recruitment of large old trees. And without tackling those issues of those key ecological processes, this system is in a lot of trouble. It is already, but if we don't tackle those threatening processes, we're in trouble. And the threatening process that we can do something about in this system at present is the way that we log the forest and how much we log the forest. So leadbeater's possum is critical, but it's emblematic of a whole series of other issues to do with fire, to do with big trees, to do with old growth, to do with carbon storage, to do with water yields, and also to do with the tourism potential of the forest. So it's a much broader basket of values and issues and problems that we're dealing with than leadbeater's possum.
Bernie, can you find your way?
David, thanks very much for a fantastic presentation. I'm Bernie Mace from Tulangi. Could you say a little bit, David, in relation to fuel reduction burns, you mentioned earlier in your talk about studies on invertebrates in the forest. I've read a few papers on the role of invertebrates in breaking down leaf litter and branch litter on the forest floor and how important they are in creating soil. And moisture-laden soil. And the fuel reduction burn process, or fire frequency in general, is actually killing these things off, and thus changing the forest structure from that point of view and making it more fire-prone.
We have not looked at fuel reduction burning in relation to invertebrates in these ash forests burning. We've looked at wildfire in relation to high severity, moderate severity and low severity fire in relation to invertebrates. So that's wildfire. And David Blair's and Annabelle Smith are doing some very elegant studies at the moment looking at the relationships between fire severity and plant responses, salvage logging and plant responses, traditional logging and plant responses, and other things. Some beautiful work coming out of that at the moment. So I'm not really in a position to talk about these water forests in relation to hazard reduction burning because it's not something that we've looked at in this particular system. We have looked at it in other systems and it's very system dependent. So hazard reduction burning in heathland, for example, in coastal New South Wales makes very little difference over a period of 10 years if it's practiced at long intervals, particularly when you do feral predator control at the same time. But it's such a different system that it's very hard to take something from that and translate it to something else with which people here might be able to relate to. So, sorry, Danny.
Thank you. Dion, right where you are. Dion, right where you are. Ray. You.
Yeah, I'm just questioning the policy of the number of trees that let go before after they've logged, that they actually leave behind, and then all of a sudden, when you go back to that particular coop, there's no trees left alive. They're all just burnt.
Yep.
And there may be one, but there's supposed to be 32 or 35 left in the coop, and yet there's only one left alive.
Okay, good question. Okay, so you're talking about tree retention policy in relation to traditional harvesting.
Yeah.
So I'll try and answer it briefly in several ways. The first one is that there has always been concern in our group and others that when a traditional clear fell takes place, the area that's cut, be it 15 hectares, 30 hectares, 80 hectares or 120 hectares, because you can have successive coops, logging coops, the area in the coop itself is unsuitable habitat for 150 to 200 years after that. So therein lies the driver for thinking about alternative forms of logging that involve the retention of islands or patches of forest within the clearfell. In part because when trees are singletons, or ones and twos on a logging coop, they die or they're fried or both. Having said that, even if we do move to retention harvesting, we will need a significant reduction in sustained yield anyway, because if we don't do that and we maintain present sustained yield, we'll overcut the forest even faster than we're doing because we'll need to cut more areas to meet that yield. So the underlying driver of sustained yield is way too high relative to the forest. And I'll digress for a few moments. We were told, and David Blair and Lockie McBurney were there with me and they will verify this, we were told that despite the fact that 42% of leadbeater's possum's habitat had been burnt, approximately 80,000 hectares of ash forest had been burnt, the forest had been significantly overcut right through the preceding time before the regional forest agreement and then the following 10 years after the regional forest agreement. We were told in 2009 the policy was there would be no net loss of forest to industry despite what had happened to the forest. And we could not believe what an appalling approach to natural resource management that was. That was number one in terms of the ridiculous statements that I've heard. That's a fundamental problem with why we're at the position we're in now. Not only for the animal, not only for fire reasons, not only for carbon reasons, not only for water reasons, but for the very sawmill part of the industry itself. I'll rest that case. So, we need a comprehensive change. 412 coops at the moment on the timber release plan. Almost every damn one of them is a clear fell. Virtually every one. It's an antiquated system. Worldwide, people have been replacing with other kinds of systems. In 2002, we held a round table meeting that included Graham Gooding from VAFI, other industry representatives, silviculturalists, people from the environmental NGOs, and we all agreed that there was a major problem and we needed to change. It's over a decade later, and still things have not changed. They have not changed. Fundamentally on the ground. I was there today with the Minister's Minder and it was able to be seen in all its glory. The other side of this is that even if we change to retention harvesting in some of these areas and we reduce sustained yield, there will still be the issue of the altered fire proneness of the system, and that's a major recurrent risk of changing the fire proneness. Hence the reason to have significant areas of the forest where we don't overlay existing disturbances with other logging disturbances. So there is that fundamental need to change the process of fire that's been altered by the way that we're cutting the forest. That is absolutely critical.
Thank you.
Thank you. Gentleman down the front.
Hi David, fantastic talk, thanks. My name's Shannon, I'm from, I've just done honours at Deakin with the Landscape Ecology Lab, and throughout my degree I've seen that the embarrassing